sacrifice to the gods for a good harvest, for example, involving bloodletting. They're both advanced in ancient times for similar reasons, like suppressing sexuality and because it's supposedly cleaner. The places they're performed are both usually the same throughout the world. You may not know that females' genitals were cut in the United States up until about 1950, so doctors advanced reasons for that too, just like they do for male genital cutting. The key point, I think, that Steve talked about yesterday, I didn't fully understand, maybe, as he said, a diagram would have helped. But the bottom line is that the male and female genitalia are identical in early gestation, and then they become analogous or homologous parts, which is to say very, very similar. So, for example, the foreskin of the penis and the clitoral hood, they're both highly sensitive, erogenous, and functional tissue. I conclude it's impossible to treat them differently from the legal perspective. So, now we're into remedies, if you will. So you're cut, what is a crime, and what claims can you bring? Talked about how in 1997 the U.S. Congress passed a law making female genital cutting a federal crime. But interestingly, there are notes when Congress made that finding, and it said female genital mutilation is a statutory a crime. I'm sorry, it's also a statutory crime in 41 states. Congress said it violates the girl's federal and state constitutional and statutory rights. What it was saying is it was already a crime. We didn't need to pass this law. We just wanted to make it really clear. So we passed this law saying it's unlawful and a crime unless medically necessary. So what I'm leading up to is if it was already criminal and male and female intersex genitalia must be treated the same, then so are all forms of genital cutting. So it constitutes criminal assault. Let me just see if I can scroll down here. So there was a 2006 circumcision case in Washington State where a father circumcised his son in a bathtub for religious reasons.
With a hunting knife.
Excuse me?
With a hunting knife.
With a hunting knife. And the court was shocked, and it said it's a clear case of criminal assault. Genital cutting is also child abuse. There's an excellent article by William Brigman in 1984, 1985. It was a really great insight, and he said if you cut off living tissue from a healthy child, it's a case of child abuse. You can't justify it on medical grounds. It's unnecessary and it's harmful. And so the bottom line is it's child abuse even if it's a pinprick of a girl's clitoris or genitalia. It's a federal offense under the U.S. Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act and the Victims of Child Abuse Act. So the Royal Dutch concluded correctly when it comes to the integrity of the girl's body, no single compromise must be made. So what that means is a doctor, nurse, medical profession doesn't even have the right to touch a boy's penis unless they have a valid medical reason to do so. Any touching violates the rights of the child. All right, so the heart of it. What civil claims can children bring? So other scholars have written that it constitutes a battery. It took me a long time to sort of realize what all the claims were that you could bring, even up until last year when I was doing this research. So a battery is defined as any harmful or offensive conduct. So, genital cutting, as we said, harms all boys and men, and it's certainly an offensive and unwanted contact. So in addition, I hope you all can follow this, even if you're not lawyers, but I think so. I think these are all fairly clear concepts and, that you don't need buzzwords to explain. But you've heard the concept of fully informed consent, that, to be valid, a medical procedure must have permission of a person entitled to authorize it who is fully informed. And we all know that we'll get to it, but doctors don't come close to fully informed parents about circumcision at all. So that makes the battery, the operation is legally invalid. It's a battery. Circumcising a boy or a girl by lay people, or a boy or girl, constitutes false imprisonment. It's when you physically restrain somebody without a valid reason. It's intentional infliction of emotional distress. The definition of that is extreme and outrageous conduct or reckless conduct. That causes plaintiffs severe or extreme emotional distress, which genital cutting does. So there's a 2015 case in England by Judge Sir James Mumby, and he said both male and female genital cutting can cause significant harm, and the latter is sometimes more severe than the former. Thus, genital cutting satisfies, well, he didn't say this, I'm saying this, satisfies the elements of intentional infliction of emotional distress. This is an important argument for us to make when people say female genital cutting is worse. Well, maybe sometimes it's worse, but male genital cutting removes half of the penile tissue, and it turns the shaft into an external organ. So that really a radical deformation of the penis. Somebody yesterday talked about trust, and this again, I realized one day this is a breach of trust. So a physician has a fiduciary duty to the patient. A physician has an even greater fiduciary duty to a child because the child's below the age of reason or decision making. So this imbalance of power is incredible. The physician has superior knowledge of medicine, and the infant can't even reason or speak. And the doctor has the power to do whatever they want to the child's body, restricted only by the rules of medical ethics and their conscience and so on. And physicians, it's an egregious violation of that trust. So there's a UVA professor, Hafenmeister, he wrote an article called The Physicians Have a Fiduciary Duty to Just Say No to Services That Are Not Medically Indicated. And as Martin just said, in 1971, the American Academy of Pediatrics said there is no medical indication to circumcise a baby boy. Of course there isn't, they're healthy. And so Hafenmeister says, well, this crosses a line that no physician is allowed to cross to operate on a healthy child. And he says, regardless of the explanation given for it. So boys, anybody who's a physician has a breach of fiduciary duty. I think lay practitioners also do. If you take control of somebody's body, you have a duty, to protect their health. In my view, we took it out of the paper, my paper with Stephen Svoboda. We just didn't want to raise a controversial issue. So it's also a case of unjust enrichment. To establish unjust enrichment, a defendant must receive a benefit. The plaintiff suffers a loss, and the defendant can't justify it. So we've said genital cutting violates all the rights of the child, and the doctor, the hospital, the pharmaceutical and cosmetics companies all end up with boys' foreskins. They don't have a right to it, and it's a multi-billion-dollar per year industry, that's for sure. Pharmaceutical companies don't do anything that doesn't involve billions of dollars. So we don't know the number. Martin says maybe it's going to get bigger later, but my guess is billions of dollars are involved, or they wouldn't be buying the foreskins. All right, so what defenses can we expect doctors and physicians to assert? Seems they fall into three categories. So one is specious or preposterous claims. The next claim is it's a parental right. We've had questions about that. And the third one is it's medicine. So, you know, dating back to 1875 in the United States or thereabouts, doctors have given the most preposterous reasons for male genital mutilation. And one of the most egregious is that babies don't feel pain, which they argued until 100 years. 100 years. Seems sort of obvious if you watch a child writhing in pain that they're in pain. So the next, as we talked about, is prevent masturbation. Well, you know, who has a right to prevent somebody from, you know, enjoying their sex organs however they want to? But it's because of the puritanical influence. It's another reason that physicians were able to medicalize it by, that was essentially a fear of the day. You know, sex was a dirty thing, so doctors said, oh, we can help with that. Then the claim is made that a baby won't remember. Well, you know, you could justify anything by saying, well, a person won't remember it. So then the claim as well, that well, we get to it, the doctor said to me, well, if we don't circumcise it now, we'll need to do it later. Well, that's untrue. You know, that's somewhere between 0.6 and 1.5% are going to need it. And then the claim is made it's better in infancy. I mean, later it's going to cost more, and you know, the boy will be awake, and you might need general anesthesia. So it actually might be better if you were going to do it at all later, because a boy could express his opinion, or a young man, and you could have general anesthesia, and also the foreskin will have separated from the glands by then. It won't have to be forced apart. The argument that it avoids embarrassment in the locker room. You know, some countries are more intact boys than circumcised. You know, it's going to happen. There's globalization. People move around. Make the son's penis match the father's, I think, is preposterous. And that the opposition is anti-Semitic. So then the next claim is it's a parental right. So you may not realize this, or perhaps you do, but the real claim is that parents can do whatever they want for any reason or no reason. So according to the American Academy of Pediatrics, dating back to 1975, personal reasons are okay, meaning, you know, the look of the penis. Cultural reasons, social reasons. I think at one time they talked about, you know, social pressures or something, complying with pressure, maybe even the weather. Religious reasons, a bad reason to spite one's ex. And I've had to handle about 4 of those cases, and they're awful, where, you know, the wife doesn't want the boy to be circumcised, and the ex wants her to be circumcised despite the ex. It's awful. It should never happen. But the bottom line is no reason is required. So do parents have that right? And then the answer is clearly no. Well, in 2012, the court in Cologne, Germany said it violates the rights of boys to bodily integrity and self-determination. And then the court also said that the boy's rights supersede the parents' rights. So back in the US or anywhere, the rule is that when parents are acting as legal, as their legal representatives for the son, as their proxy, they represent the child. So it doesn't matter what the parents' preferences are, they have a duty as Michael said, to act in the best interest of the child. That's the major rule about how children should be treated under the law. But also, there's absolutely no substance to claim that a person has a right to modify another person's body other than for a valid medical reason. These individual rights that date back to the 18th century in England, they're rights that adhere to individuals. They're not a right they belong to individuals. You can't impose your right on somebody else. It's a non-starter. But let's talk about this religious right specifically. So for the same reason, there's no religious right to modify another person's body. Again, it's a non-starter. Let's see. So there was a famous case in Massachusetts, 1944, Prince versus Massachusetts, where a parent was having a child hand out religious leaflets on a highway, and the court said that's dangerous. The child could get killed. You're not allowed to do that. So yesterday, one of the speakers said that the state has a right to protect children over the right to religion. So in this Oregon case, Bolt v. Bolt, that John Geisinger worked on, the father wanted to circumcise the boy for religious reasons, and the court interviewed the boy and found out he didn't want to be circumcised and stopped the circumcision. Now it seems to me if there was a religious right to circumcise, he couldn't have done that. So a consensus seems to be building in Europe based on several cases I've read on attorneys for the rights of the child, translated them, that there is no religious right to circumcise. It's very favorable for us. The Cologne case we talked about. Then there was a 2013 Swiss court that prohibited a religious circumcision on equal protection grounds. By the way, the Supreme Court famously noted that human sacrifices could not be excused by religious belief, as an example. And then there was a UK case of religious circumcision of two Muslim boys. Sorry, parents were Muslim. They wanted their children to be Muslim, and the court said, well, they have the right to decide when they become adults. All right, so then we get to the defense. It's medicine. So it has an array of medical benefits. That's what the San Francisco legislation said. An array of medical benefits? What benefits? So the doctors have claimed since 1875 that it cures more than 100 diseases. And interestingly, it's often the disease of the day, fear of masturbation, or when tuberculosis was the biggest problem, or when syphilis was the biggest problem. So all these claims have been disproved. So the circumcision rate was falling, and in 2012, the AAP claimed new evidence shows that it prevents HIV. And so, as Martin said, the Canadian study shows that it does not prevent HIV at all in the United States. But boys are not at risk of adult diseases. Even if it reduced it by 60% in absolute terms, which sounds great, that's only 1.3% in real terms. What that means is if you have sex with a woman who has HIV, you're going to get HIV. And over time, and you better protect yourself or not have sex. So I've come to the conclusion that it has no medical benefits, not even potential medical benefits. A medical benefit would be a medical reason to choose it. There are no medical reasons to choose it. So in my view, it's not medicine. It's still violence after all these years, still crazy after all these years. So even if these claims are true, it doesn't benefit most boys or men. As we said, UTIs can be treated. Boys are not at risk of adult diseases. It's unproven whether it reduces penile cancer, and it doesn't reduce HIV in North America. But the whole idea of a preventive amputation of a body part is insane. I mean, if you cut off fingertips, they wouldn't become diseased, but then you wouldn't be able to use the fingertips. People like to use their fingertips. It's like scarification. Do we mark people's heads? It's all crazy. So that sort of led me to conclude that circumcision is a fraud. So a fraud is any form of deceit where you intend to defraud somebody, or you tend to deceive somebody either through a statement or an omission, and the person relies on what you say, and they are deceived, and then harm results. So at first I was thinking, well, it's medical fraud, but then over time it became clear that this fraud permeates the entire sales cycle. There's false advertising, like saying it's a parent's right, or it's good for your health. So targeting the helpless. It targets infants unable to object. Robert Darby, the great historian of circumcision, wrote. But it also targets mothers. The mother's just given birth, and they're often out of it. And so they're targeting somebody who's incapacitated. But moreover, even the fathers, they only give them a minute to decide, a couple of minutes. So that's duress. And then, as I said yesterday in answer to when I asked the question, according to Intact America, physicians solicit parental consent 8 times on average, which is badgering. So if parents say no, would you like son circumcised? They don't give a reason. You say no, they keep asking, just keep coming and asking. I mean, at some point, parents fold. So that's a big reason that the circumcision rate is so high. So what's this medical fraud? As Martin said, well, first of all, they don't tell you anything about the foreskin, and it's erogenous, functional, people like to have it. They understate the risks. Oh, they assign no value to the foreskin. So the AAP said the benefits outweigh the risk. They left out harm. They assign no value to it. Imagine saying like a preventive mastectomy is a good idea, and leave out that women, value their breast. And they certainly don't disclose the pain, the risks, the harms. A legal fraud is when you have a legal right and somebody tricks you out of it. And so the AAP should know by now that children have legal rights. But they argue they don't. They argue it's a parental right, and they argue they have a claim to do this when doctors absolutely are not allowed to operate on a healthy child. So that constitutes legal fraud. The first article I wrote was about how it's unlawful to use Medicaid to pay for circumcision. Medicaid only pays for surgery that's medically necessary. It does not pay for elective, cosmetic, experimental surgery. So in my view, all these, well, let me add, the doctors falsely swear on a form that it's medically necessary to circumcise the boy at birth or later. And they use false diagnoses, so they know they're lying. So it's a case of intentional fraud. In all these states, somewhere between 14 and 17 have ended coverage. All the other ones, they're enabling the fraud, although they may not know it. And the sale of foreskins, the parents aren't told. If the parents were told, they probably would say no. So let's see. Where's the next slide? Yeah. So one day I was thinking, well, should it be the burden on the child to prove that a doctor defrauded them? It doesn't make sense. It's hard to prove fraud. You can prove it through circumstantial evidence, and in some states, recklessness is enough. And I remember this doctrine of constructive fraud. So it sounds fancy. What is it? Basically, a physician has a duty to justify every procedure. And if they can't do it, fraud is presumed. And the rule is to prevent unfairness. So children, and when they become adults, they don't need to prove intent to defraud. So this is a powerful tool. So let's revisit the pitch to me. So a doctor came to the door, offered it to me. Well, you're not allowed to perform it. It violates all rules of medical ethics. You're only allowed to operate when it's medically necessary. You're not allowed to solicit it. I knew nothing about it, so it was unfair surprise. They took unfair advantage of me. And my wife said, you decide. She was incapacitated. I remember now she had a really glassy-eyed look. She was out of it. And doctors know that, and they should know that, because they need to know that when a patient signs a form, that they're able to give consent. They target children unable to object, as Robert Darby said. He told me it's not medically justified. Then why the hell are you offering to cut off part of my son's penis? It's best performed in infancy, while it's best not performed at all. And he forgot to mention what the foreskin is, what circumcision is, trauma, regret, and anger. Thank you. I'm very proud of it. Lucky though, lucky. Yeah, so when is the deadline to sue? So this is the second paper I wrote at Cambridge. I was going to write another paper, and then I was thinking, wait, it seems unfair that, let me back up. I'm finding people coming forward and say, can I sue? And by the time they come forward and say, can I sue, the answer is always, you're too late. And I was thinking, well, how come they didn't come forward earlier? Well, they only just became activists, and they only just read articles like saying circumcision is a fraud. So in the Levine case, the start of it was somebody heard about my article, and then he said it's a fraud. Well, tell me more, and then he brought a lawsuit. So there's this rule called the discovery rule, and it says that it would be unfair to force a person to bring suit, or to say they're barred from bringing a suit before they discovered, or should have discovered, that they have a legal claim. So then I was thinking, well, what does somebody whose genitals are cut, what do they have to know to bring a suit? Well, first of all, they have to know they were cut. Now, it might seem obvious if your genitals were cut. But if you were an infant, you won't know that until some point when you discover it. And it turns out quite a lot of circumcised men don't know they're circumcised. Then you have to know you were harmed. And the AAP says it's not harmful. So most people don't know that they were harmed. They can still have sex. And then importantly, you need to know you were wrong, meaning you have some legal claim that you can bring. And what I realized, it's impossible to know that. Even if you heard all the activists talk and heard about all of the lawyers talk, there's never been a case. Nobody's ever won. Nobody knows for sure they could win. And so I conclude anyone can sue anytime, no matter when they were cut. So I'm just finishing that paper up, but I hope to publish it this year. So the next thing, somebody talked to Joe about malpractice action. It's reasonable to think you need to bring a malpractice action. And David Llewellyn and all of his lawsuits, the penis lawyer, they're malpractice actions. But I was thinking malpractice is when you do something negligently. You had the right to perform it, you did it badly. But genital cutting or male circumcision, you're not allowed to do it. It's not part of your license. It crosses a boundary, as we've said, in fact, even into criminality, regardless of the reasons advanced for it. So in my opinion, they're not acting as doctors, they're acting as a layperson. So there is a problem if a statute says in order to sue a doctor for anything, you have to bring a malpractice action. It's pretty much black and white. But I think I would make this argument, if it ever needed to be made, it'd be better to bring a lawsuit where there was a malpractice as well, and then go through malpractice and bring these other claims. But in my opinion, the doctor is not acting as a doctor, but as a layperson. It's not a malpractice claim, and it's much simpler, fewer obstacles. All right, can I win without a try? I'm getting to the end. I'm pleased to tell you thank you for your patience. Yeah, but Eric did tell me I had a little more time. Yeah, so, when is genital cutting justified? So I was thinking, well, it needs to be medically necessary. But because it's such a violation of such a key right, it has to be essential to the child's health. And then if the child's old enough, the child has to consent as well. But if it can be deferred until adulthood, it has to be deferred in order to respect the child's autonomy. So unless those conditions are present, it's indefensible. And that's the title of the article that Stephen Svoboda and I just finished. Genital cutting is legally indefensible and grounds for summary judgment. Summary judgment, okay, it's a legal buzzword, but it just means there's no need for a trial. So if you are a girl or a woman, you were cut, you go to court, you say you want damages. Is there a need for a trial? There's no need for a trial. You just say I was cut. They didn't have a right to do it. And a boy or intersex person could say the same thing. I see no possible defenses, so I believe there's a right to summary judgment to win without a trial. So, then I was wondering, well, what could the damages be? And to make this short, but one's private parts, they're private, they're priceless, right? I think you would argue that it messed up your sex life, made you really unhappy, and I think the sky's the limit in the damages that people could win. I haven't fully thought through class action, but I think because genital cutting is indefensible, I believe a class action is possible at the right time. This isn't the right time. You need society to be on board, but I think a class action is possible. I looked it up quickly, and it seems if liability is clear and the only issue is damages, you could have separate hearings on damages. Why should a person sue? I being anybody's genitals are cut. One is to get compensation. You can never get, your full genitalia back. But also, George Denniston of Doctors Opposing Circumcision, he's firmly of the belief that unless doctors are held financially accountable, this will never stop. I think that's really clear to me. Just think about it. A study came out saying it removes the most sensitive part of the penis. Did the AAP care about that? Then the AAP's own committee said it can cause neurological damage. Don't cause pain to infants. Did they care? Then it doesn't reduce HIV. Did they disclose that? Boys can die. Do they care? They don't care about the health of boys and men, those who perform this. They only care about the money. And so lawsuits are the only way to protect the next generation. And then I think if we are able to stop male genital cutting here, it will help end female genital cutting around the world as well, and intersex genital cutting. So good news is it violates many rights. They have many claims. European courts seem to be deciding in that favor. You can sue anytime. It's not malpractice. You have a right to win without a trial. So the bad news, these are unproven legal ideas. I'm absolutely persuaded they're correct, but you have to fight the fact that nobody's ever won a case. Powerful adversaries, judges inclined to be culturally biased, need a specialized lawyer, need a lot of money, and you can't afford to lose. So there's the last slide, which mentions 3 of my papers. I'll just go to that. These are the 3 papers, or actually there's 4, that give back up for everything I've said today. So just email me if you like, pwadler2@gmail.com. I'll be happy to send you any of these papers. And that's it for the talk.
All right, well, thank you so much, Peter, for the rundown on the legal causes of action if you're circumcised, right? If someone cut off part of your body, part of your genitals, right? And how can you get legal vindication, right? And so these are lawsuits that we are likely to bring depending on resources. So this is another pitch. You know, if you want to see more intact litigation, like in Oregon, become a monthly donor, right? Click become a monthly donor on intactlegal.org. Or donate to the GoFundMe. So we've got some questions. We've got about 15 minutes before lunch. We're going to start with you, Tim. So your name first. Oh, sure. Well, let me give this a 10 and then I'll get the slide.